Welcome to a conversation on how nonprofit leaders can think about and actually proceed through a successful transition with their tech stack. There is a lot that goes into this process, and the bigger the piece of technology, the more sophisticated that process can be. And there's a lot of webinars out there that talk about specific features and functions of platforms. We really want to actually get into the process at a higher level and help folks learn from people who have done the process successfully. So there will be a little bit of talk on technology, but we also want to look at process both from the standpoint of how someone like a Julie, an external consultant, would come into an organization like Sarah's at the Jane Goodall Institute of the US to make this a success. Here's a run of the next 60 minutes or so. We do want to cover these different areas, but also give a lot of time, if possible, to Q&A. But we want to look at really early on what are the warning signs between a situation where we have challenges as an organization that might be process driven, but maybe there's actually a tech problem that we need to address. And then going from recognizing that problem to creating a plan of action, and then a framework for making a useful evaluation of the different technology options that exist in the space. And it can seem like there are many, and I'm going to give you a bit of a high level take on how I think about the market from actually a salesperson standpoint. More on me in just a second. What are the common pitfalls that we see folks get into that you can avoid, as well as just making sure that the transition to a new system is as smooth as it can be, not just for you as a leader, but also for the end users who are going to be doing more of the day-to-day work in that new system. And then we'll close this off with kind of a neat sneak peek of what Sarah's team at Jane Goodall have put together, built on Engaging Networks. I'm Mike Bird. I am one of the account executives at Engaging Networks. I'm based in Canada, work with our Canadian clients and prospective clients, but also in the US as well. Much larger pond to go fishing in, so I try and fish in both. And I'm joined by two great people, Julie Gibson of SJ Consulting, CEO, founder, owner, all of the things. And then Sarah, who is the VP of Development Marketing Operations. I'm going to kick it over to Julie for an introduction.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today. So a little bit about SJ Consulting. I founded the company in '06. We have worked with nonprofits across both digital and CRM space for 19 years. So it's been an incredible experience, launching over 4,500 digital projects. Those can be entire websites, peer-to-peer, volunteer, email campaigns, and all points in between. We've helped raise more than 20 billion in online giving. We've implemented and or improved, because we work with a lot of our CRM clients on improvement of their current data system, CRMs, about 3,000 of those. And what drives us every day is the passion for helping nonprofits succeed. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks for being with us. And Sarah, over to you. Would love
Yeah,
to learn more about what you're focused on.
of course. Sarah Festa, thanks so much for having me. I work at the Jane Goodall Institute, an organization that works to fulfill the mission and the vision of the late Dr. Jane Goodall. We're primarily focused around wildlife conservation in Africa. We do scientific research in Africa in some of the national parks there, as well as manage animal welfare at quite a few chimpanzee and wildlife sanctuaries. We also do a lot of environmental and economic development work and land use planning in Africa with local communities, as well as our education program, Roots and Shoots, which inspires young people to do things to take action in their community. So that's JGI, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you as well, Sarah. Yeah, it's timely. Obviously, it's a big moment with the passing of Dr. Jane Goodall. Probably a really big moment of change for you that is following this big change that you made to go to Engaging Networks. Really quickly on Engaging Networks, we are an integrated tool set. So we do everything from donation pages and email marketing, email automations, to peer-to-peer fundraising, ticketed event type engagements. And we're a platform that sits on top of a database of record to really allow an organization to better engage supporters, build a larger supporter list, have those supporters take more actions and ultimately drive more money through the development function. Really neat company, been around for about 25 years. And the long story short is that we are kind of the company behind a lot of some of the world's most important causes. We're not everywhere and we're not for everyone, but we are really proud to be, and do not take this for granted, a partner to this particular part of the nonprofit world. And so we're excited to have other folks join us, whether this is the first time you're hearing about engaging networks or not. I'm going to kick it over to you, Julie. This is really a great opportunity for folks to learn about what are the warning signs here, and when do we really want to actually start to take action on stuff. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah. So day in and day out, we are asked to assess what our clients are utilizing, whether they're trying to figure out their sort of ecosystem, or their tech stack as they currently have it, or maybe they're looking for, end of life this year for multiple different platforms, and they're trying to figure out what's the next big step for them. So the five critical warning signs that you've outgrown your tech stack. One is data quality crisis. So all these different silos. I was just on a call yesterday where a client said, "Hey, we have our volunteer system, we have our membership system, we have our event system, we have our email platform. We don't have a full picture of all of our constituents and what their interests are, what their activities are, how we can best communicate with them." So that's a very frequent sort of report from our clients. Communication breakdown is the second one. So when you have disconnected systems, how do you best communicate to your constituents if you have opt-outs in MailChimp, but they're not coming back to your CRM? If you're sending emails out of your volunteer or event system that don't know what are in the other two systems for opt-outs, or maybe people are opting into very specific interest-based communications. The reporting nightmares that we hear about. Can we use BI because all the things we're using don't have centralized reports that really give us a full picture? And then you have to move into the BI world of it versus looking at a tech stack that might actually work for you instead of against you. Manual workarounds are everywhere. So the high overhead of hiring external consultants to do multiple pieces of the puzzle because your team is really needing to focus on year-end fundraising or a specific campaign that's going on, and it's just spread too thin to do the most basic of tasks. And then strategic paralysis. So these are the limitations with your tech stack currently that are preventing you from executing all of your priorities. You have these big overarching goals for your board or for your executive director, but the technology you have is just not getting you there. All right, so the first step, recognizing the early warning signs. So some of the tech stack components that we see a lot with our nonprofit clients are over on the right side. Obviously, your CRM should be the source of truth. However, with the disconnectivity of multiple different platforms in use, you end up not having that source of truth. So you're unable to have unified donor insights. You're having to sort of be a contortionist to get your reporting done. And then, of course, if anybody's ever done the escape room, you have 1,000 little tasks that you have to do in order to get to the goal. And so that's what we're kind of looking at here today with Mike and Sarah. What prevents the unified donor insights? So we see this often, right? You have organization silos where you have different teams who are using data in different ways and out of different systems. And again, sort of pointing to some of these main platforms that we see all the time. You have data quality issues. So if you were to compile all the constituents from all your different sources of data, what kind of duplicates are you going to have? What type of old data will you have from addresses or emails or a spousal partner, all those different things? And then communication breakdowns between your teams due to those disconnected systems. And that is such an often refrain from our clients that yesterday someone was saying, "Hey, we just heard that someone who only gives us $50 a month is actually, they could be a major donor because they're worth $10 million and they love giving to the parks." Well, they're not even tapping into that because it was in a totally different source of data and the teams weren't talking. So I mentioned a little bit about the reporting, but the troublesome reporting and the manual workarounds, it drains the resources on your team, especially when there's time on mission. That should be sort of the focal point for your nonprofit. You have high overhead and it's labor intensive, in particular if you're having to now use data warehousing, BI reporting to gather the data from all your different systems. It can be frustrating and discouraging. I definitely hear that a lot from our nonprofit clients. And it causes a loss of your talented team members because they get so frustrated or they're getting sort of a negative feedback from their leadership because they're not giving the full picture data that's out there with all your different tech stack. So where do you go from here, right? You need to evaluate and decide. This is such a critical piece of the puzzle. It's making your evaluation decision. So from problem to action, what are the steps that you take? So consultants like SJ Consulting will help nonprofits and organizations distinguish between the process problems and the technology limitations. And I know Sarah, when Jane Goodall was looking at what to use next, you were looking at the big picture and starting with the results that you want is so critical. Like, what are those end goals? If you had a blank slate, what would that look like for leadership in your organization?
Yes, that's exactly what we looked at. When I started at JGI, the digital fundraising program was very small and mostly around email. And so it took us a long time to get to the place where we were ready to make a move, but we created a vision for direct marketing and digital fundraising specifically. But we also, at the same time, and I wanted to touch on the tech stack part, we also had the same problem of having multiple tools across the whole organization, different departments that weren't talking to each other. And so we had the same goal of kind of creating more of a hybrid approach and bringing that data into fewer systems. So yes, we married the vision for what we wanted to do in digital fundraising with the vision we had for our tech stack, and kind of married the two together in our evaluation. And that's how we started.
That's perfect. And that kind of arcs across the number two there too, which is assessing all the processes, the opportunities, why do we do things a certain way, and how do we want to get there? I think that's a critical step here. And obviously, if this is all done correctly, it exposes the tech limitations. You know what you want to do, but how do we do it with what we have? Many times, the answer is you can't. You have to look outside of your current tech stack.
And I think
Uh,
that's what also took us so long to make the decision is we were trying to get the current tech stack to do the things we wanted to and to give it a chance. And we got to the point where we just had to, admit to ourselves that it wasn't going to work.
oh yes, yeah, and yesterday I felt like I was saying you cannot put that square peg into the round hole. As much as you bang on it with a hammer, it just won't go in there. And the client kept saying, "But we just paid all this money 2 years ago. We don't want to move again." But you can't do what you want to do in what you have, and it's very unfortunate. Sometimes you can. Sometimes we can twist all sorts of ways, but a lot of times you really need to find the thing that fits your organization. Expertise in the systems is so vital, right? Sometimes when a nonprofit says, well, we think we know what we want to do, but you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes you've heard, catchphrases of, oh, LO, or, Classy, or GoFundMe Pro, or MailChimp can do this one thing. But if you don't know the big picture, it's very difficult. And that's why a lot of times consultants will come into view. And then an objective view is extraordinarily helpful, right? So you came in it with an objective point of view of the goals, the vision, what needed to be there from a tech stack.
I love
Uh,
that. And just,
yeah,
I'm just going to jump in because there are two things that you just reminded me of that people may be feeling of simple heuristics here, thinking of the pain of same outweighing the pain of change. And people stay with that pain of same for sometimes a very long time.
yeah,
And then eventually the pain of change is a little lower. And we can say, let's go and do that. That's often something that folks say to me.
100%.
Yeah.
So the consultants framework, that would be folks like us. We have a couple more people joining, which is great. So how do you distinguish between a process issue that needs refinement and a technology constraint that requires new tools? And you know, a lot of our clients will say, we have these specific products. Can you make them work for us? Absolutely. We will do our very best to make them work for you, but you still end up with some of the things we talked about on the first couple of slides, disconnected tech stack, right? You can do this one or two things in this platform. You can do these things really great in this other platform versus looking at the big picture. So when you're working with consultants who are non-biased, we work with a lot of different platforms. We have the expertise across all of those platforms. We can ask you very specific questions and probing questions that uncover the root causes of your frustrations. So, can this be solved with training and better procedures? Is the limitation inherent to the software itself? Would a workaround create more problems? Boy, sometimes that is absolutely the case. And then what's the long-term cost of maintaining the status quo? Do you have to keep hiring consultants and developers to do what you should be able to do very simply, building a new appeal or campaign page, building that email that's going out without having to know HTML in depth, which is so inherent of multiple systems. So how do you know if you're ready to transform with confidence? You start with an honest assessment. You recognize the warning signs and distinguish between the process and the technology. And I think that's what Sarah was mentioning a minute ago. Building the strategy. So developing that clear evaluation framework. A lot of times that's a big, like a requirements grid that has must have, would like to have, don't really need, but that would be nice to have. And then being able to align very, very specifically across your teams what those buckets are from features and functionality and being able to see that big picture. So it's no longer in the weeds, it's looking at it from a 40,000-foot view as well. Navigating with expertise. So learning from those like us with others who have successfully transformed tech stacks. Sarah is a wonderful expert now at Jane Goodall because she went through the process. She looked at options, and now that they're in engaging networks, she knows what that transformation was, and she knows what those features and functionality wins are for an organization like Jane Goodall.
Yes. And I would add just start early. JGI, we had to start 12, 18 months early communicating to your example, Julie, about switching a system that you might have just been in for 2 years. That's a big ask of leadership. And so, especially if there's budget considerations. So that would be my main, another piece of advice is start with leadership early to make sure that you have a smooth decision-making framework the whole time.
100%. I had a frantic call just this week from a client who said, our contract with X vendor expires on May 1st. Can we move out of all things digital before that date? And I'm thinking, do you know what you want to go to? Do you know what you really need? Do you know what your budget is? Do like there were a lot of questions there. So when you have the runway, it makes such a smoother transition.
Yes, I would echo that as we start to get into this sort of having an evaluation framework. The runway is huge because someone who is giving their team not only time to make a good evaluation, but to have a smooth implementation based off of the needs, the strengths, and the weaknesses of their own team, having what I call a warm-up period. So as you are coming off of a platform that maybe your team is really used to something brand new, you don't want to just be doing a hard switch off to on. Maybe there's something that you still need to test out or get familiar with before your team is really ready for go time in especially giving season, as an example. And one last thing I would just love to add to Julie's really great points about working with consultants. I'm reading a book that's basically about stoicism right now. And it's the idea that we as humans, right, we sometimes struggle to solve our own problems because we get subjective, we get in our heads, we put ourselves in the way of an obstacle. And the consultant who doesn't have those same elements of sort of personal baggage gets to come in and remove the obstacle or make it a clearer path for you to get a clearer vision of what the real problem is and what a solution could be. When we get into this phase here where an organization wants to make a change, they started to bring some people together, they started to get leadership on board. There's a really interesting bit of research that, again, this is kind of a salesperson's perspective. I get to work with all of these different folks going through changes. And I'm not always privy to some of the internal conversations that Sarah probably had as they were going through theirs. But there's always a fear of making the wrong move here. And that almost always wins out against the fear of missing out. Like FOMO beats FOMO most of the time in an organization. And so, how do we think about looking at the landscape, not being too intimidated, not getting bogged down in the evaluation process, because that can take the energy out of people's sales to make any change? There are sort of three really big different categories, and a big strategic question that folks are often, by the time they're talking to me, have asked themselves, or they're starting to, which is, do we want to go in the direction of having an all-in-one kind of product cover all of these different teams and functions? Do we want to have this cart of point solutions that may be, quote, best in class, best in breed? Those are the words that are used to describe those. Or do we want to take a bit of a hybrid approach? And there are pros and cons to all of those categories. Engaging Networks, as a disclaimer, is in the all-in-one realm, but we also do work with in this hybrid model with a lot of other point solutions. And some of the things that folks are, whether they're aware of it or not, that they're really considering with an all-in-one is the ownership piece of this tool. If I have to have 4 different power users for 4 different tools, that's a very different reality versus having 4 power users in one tool. You can imagine with limited budgets and staffs, especially, how that can be a big deal. Data connectivity, and we've touched on this a little bit already, the data contortion. I was on a call earlier today, really just focused on data management and questions like, how is this data represented in your system? How does it get translated? How much volume can that integration handle? How frequently is that sync? Do that for a whole bunch of other tools that you're trying to put together in a centralized ecosystem, and that gets really complicated really quickly. A drawback of sometimes working with an all-in-one is that they won't have the most cutting edge features or be right on the bleeding edge. But a lot of the time, that's okay. A lot of the time, the most important features that, to what Julie was saying in the requirements document, right, that those must-haves are actually not that flashy. They're usually things that really need to drive reliability, ease of use, value at the end of the day, as opposed to this really nifty little AI widget. Talked a little bit about how the data connectivity can be challenging when you have a bunch of different solutions that probably don't talk to each other, in addition to some of the challenges that they might have in just talking to a core database of record. But we do, like I said, work with a lot of groups who are using a bit of Engaging Networks and a bit of another solution and a bit of another solution in a really thoughtful way. And there's no single right answer here. That's the point, is different teams will have different capabilities and the right approach for them based off of what they can do and what they can handle. Just a few other considerations, and then I'd love to hear from Julie and Sarah, is just having a clear decision-making structure. So when it's not sure who is responsible for what in the process, who is talking to vendors, who is scheduling calls, who is getting quotes, et cetera, reading proposal documents, all of these things can lead to confusion and what we call death by committee sometimes of the whole project. Creating criteria that's clear, and oftentimes we get, as vendors, we get a criteria document that is that we have to go back on and ask a bunch of questions and help really ensure our understanding. But sometimes that also helps the prospective client better understand their own requirements too. So that's a neat thing that needs its own space in the process. And then, like we said, the runway piece, having time to do all of this and making sure that people have the time to commit to this change. It's not a small thing. And Sarah, maybe you can talk a little bit about what that was like for your own team, having to kind of, you put your regular day job, time in the mission
Mhm.
aside to go be like, let's go look at tools. It's a big distraction sometimes.
Yeah, it really was, but I mean, it ended up great. I think for JGI, we really had the two our former tools. We had two contract deadlines, so we established our hard stops of when we really had to make a move, and we backtracked from there. So the conversations with leadership and the getting everybody on board is the thing that actually took the most amount of time, and we did have to pivot a few times. Our the selection process, we really laid out clear decision makers. We had a small team who communicated out. So I reiterating the communication piece of this, who's the decision makers and who just needs to be communicated with to make sure that they're in the loop. So being really clear about that. Definitely the early and often communication with leadership, like when they sign the contract, that is not the first time they should be hearing about this change. And I also think like leading with the excitement of the thing. So we evaluated like core functionality, like you were suggesting, like ease of building emails, more robust personalization in emails. So we really one that I really love that I'll talk about later is the marrying the offline data with online giving
Hmm.
data, which our previous system couldn't do. So we really try to get people excited about the new stuff that we would be able to do, and then kind of outline that dream functionality, stuff that JGI doesn't do yet, but we can put it on our immediate roadmap or like maybe a further down the line roadmap. So that's kind of how we approached it. It's just our a long like ramp up change management piece with leadership, and then once we had the decision, it was very quick after that.
I loved how you kind of were able to build a little bit of hype around the project, kind of adding a little bit of fuel energy to the change. I often will think of this process of change that I'm playing a small part in as a vendor, as what you just said. We have to kind of create a picture of what's possible and excite people for change. And then at the same time, we also have to de-risk and show, hey, this is actually, you're in good hands. This is a safe call as well. Um, Again, going back to that earlier point, people are often afraid of change and making a mistake. And so I do think that sometimes you have to balance both, right? It's like, hey, not only is this going to take us further, it's going to do it in a way that does not disrupt, and that makes good use of our investment.
I
Julie,
think
anything
Sarah,
you'd add? Yeah.
yeah, Sarah, you made such a great point also with that core team, right? You knew who the core team would be and how you would communicate out to others. Because we have seen on projects where it becomes sort of an analysis paralysis, right? You have so many people involved in the decision making that no decision ever gets made because you keep having different opinions conflicting. And then the flip side, we've seen them with just a couple of people who thought they could make all the decisions without finding out more. And then you implement a whole solution and the rest of the picture comes into play like, well, this doesn't work for me. This doesn't work how I had wanted it. I heard about this, but I was never involved. So knowing who those people are is so critical for success of the project. Yeah.
Definitely. I feel like we are leading into the common pitfalls right off the bat. I love it.
Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah, and I think Sarah, you and I are going to lob on this one, but the I think just that first bullet point was what I was talking about, which is the undefined decision-making authority. Um, I've seen it on both sides of the coin where somebody's just chomping at the bit to finish a project, they don't get the right people involved. Other ones where, like I said, the analysis paralysis, that tends to be more of the use case scenario. Then we have the insufficient preparation. We can make things happen very, very quickly with our clients, but preferably having that runway, having the time, the thoughtful time to truly prepare for the implementation, the onboarding, the pre-training. I call it pre-training because it may not be on your implementation. It might be just learning the platform, learning the features and functionality, and providing that training along the implementation time span ends up making such a successful project at the end. Underestimating the change management needs, I think that is critical when you start talking about different people involved in different facets of your organization. like I mentioned before, events team, the volunteer team, the membership team, the major donor gift officers. So you have these different people who are now going to be affected by the change that's happening to the tech stack. So, as Sarah mentioned, she had this core team that then communicated and informed and educated everyone as the thing went along, instead of just signing on the dotted line at the end and not knowing what they got. The technology, sure, the features are fantastic to know that they fit, but looking at the big picture, knowing that what are the integrations to the CRM. You want certain features out of what you currently do on 4 different systems. In fact, a client right now has 8 different digital systems they're using. Engaging Networks is able to solve almost every single one of those with one solution. It's going to take all of this time and all of the energy getting into the CRM and streamline it. And then poor stakeholder communication. Sarah, again, you communicated that so beautifully, but if you'd like to touch on maybe the technology features, and I think you mentioned that sort of looking at it from holistic view across the arc of the project.
Yeah, I think JGI did a lot of things really well, I think, in our transition, and we also had some things where we could have improved. I think we did a good job with decision making, not only in the decision making of what product to choose, but who was a decision maker in the implementation, and empowering the team that was implementing to make decisions in the moment, and also discussing before when they needed to like escalate questions, like which decisions could they make in the moment in implementation, and which things did they need to go back to the larger team to discuss. So having those conversations before was really helpful. I think something that JGI could have done better, and it was mostly the timing issue because we spent so much time needing to change management at the front end. The implementation part was really condensed for JGI. So I think the conversations that we had previously helped influence and helped us be able to speed up the implementation, but we did have to pivot. In our situation, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, we had to actually implement kind of in 2 phases because we had 2 systems, one for donation form functionality and one for email functionality. And we ended up having to implement those separately, but it worked because we communicated with the group, we communicated with Engaging Networks and SJC, and we were not afraid to pivot, but we kept the deadline in mind. We knew we had to move by this time, and we were just able to communicate as a team and get the things done. I think in a perfect world, we would have had more time. There was a lot of factors that happened in the fall for JGI, including it just being Q4. But we were able to come together and get that done. And a lot of that was the decision making and the conversations we had before in the lead up to the implementation. So don't be afraid if the implementation has to be quick. So that's the piece I would add here.
Yeah, and I love how you also kind of put a couple of things on the shelf for, okay, let's get live with what we absolutely need. And now we're looking in this quarter, implementing the rest of the story, if you will, right? Let's add some bells and whistles. Let's turn on some other functionality that may not have been in there when you first started the evaluation project, right? But I love that it became a phased methodology. So then you didn't have a lot of stress in the beginning and you met your goals.
Yep.
So planning for success, gaining the consensus when leadership agrees that change is needed, that's critical. And advocating effectively across your departments, securing buy-in, preparing your teams for transition. I mentioned the training piece. Any implementation we do on the CRM side and on the digital side, we always train throughout the project. And then we provide the really intense training at the end that's hands-on on your systems and what we've developed for you. And then, of course, expectations around timelines. Managing the transformation when momentum stalls, right? So maybe somebody had to go out on maternity leave, or someone got really sick and couldn't be in the office for a little bit, or you had a change of management, right, throughout the process that happened. Being able to know how to keep the sort of train on the tracks, if you will. Were there any type of hiccups along the way for you all during this process?
Yeah, I think on the next slide is really how we laid out our kind of decision making for the actual implementation part. We really had a small team that was managing that implementation, and they were empowered to make the decisions. So I think the the planning, again, the planning part helped us know what we needed to do. The small team helped us make decisions fast, but the timeline really did get crunched at the end there. But we were able to communicate our way through it, and pivot. So it was
Great.
good.
I've got your image right here, Sarah, that we can take a look at. And we also got a question that's sort of related to what we're talking about right now. I'm just going to surface it right now. Chris, who seeing the name and I'm like, is a former colleague of mine. So thank you so much for being here, Chris. A pitfall that he's encountered is to sort of often see sort of a cross-departmental project get pigeonholed as belonging to just one function when there really needs to be the entire organization moving in some way. Um, to your point, Sarah, not everybody has to be involved in everything all the time. Did you have do you have any guidance on sort of how you can shift that mindset so that it's not just one group's responsibility to be owning the whole thing, which can be sometimes disempowering for everybody else, but managing that balance of like, hey, we also don't want to get bogged down with everybody getting involved.
That's a great question. At at JGI, we've done a lot of work on the in the marketing and development team to kind of work with our colleagues who have to kind of focus on the function of email marketing as opposed to everyone has their own audience to talk to. So
Hmm.
we worked with these teams to establish ourselves as the expert of the email marketing tool and the function of email marketing. And but being encouraging of like, tell us what your audience needs, let us help you and support you so that you guys can do your programmatic work and we can really lean into the lane that we are experts on, which is technology and marketing. So it wasn't that they were not at the table in the decision making, it's that we did the pre-work of communicating what they needed and then built trust to be able to represent their needs in the change management and in the selection, so that by the time we got to the selection, they trusted that we would have their best interests for their audience as well as ours. And so that's how we approached it. And in our first phase, the first phase was definitely donors getting into EN. We have
Hmm.
other phases where those other audiences will be implemented into EN.
It's neat to hear. The key word there really, as you said, is trust and all the steps that you took to get people gradually on board. Cool. Here is your sort of really neat graphical approach to some of this. What else should we know from this diagram?
I think the main thing I wanted to get across here was just at the towards the end, the sustaining momentum. We had our eyes on the hard deadline of those contract renewals or endings because we didn't want to, pay more to extend contracts in old systems. So we really kept our eye on the ball, and that kind of helped us maintain momentum. And then just making the point again that don't be afraid to roll out with, like, our goal was to roll out with just what the donors had experienced before. Like, as long as they're not losing any of their experience, then we're good. And then to Julie's point, we can use Q1, Q2 to test new things, to roll out new functionality that we didn't have before. But really, we were able to stay focused on just, the main goal, which was to end those other contracts.
Yeah, sometimes it can be a matter of, hey, let's manage this the best we can, and we can always build on top of a base later, but let's get the base figured out.
Yes.
Cool. On that note, let's pause. I'm going to shift my screen share over here, and we're going to actually take a little bit of a look at what you have built out, um, which is pretty neat stuff. I'm going to we're going to start with some of what you've done actually on the email front here. So, resharing. Can you walk us through some of the things that you've been working on from a template standpoint on the email side?
Yes. So the email side is actually what we rolled out with in January. So during our migration, we had to start with donation forms. So we went into Giving Tuesday on EN donation forms and then migrated our email in January. So we use that time. And this is one of the things I love about EN because the native templates are super great, but it's also really easy to build and customize almost anything you like in email. And they do it with these components. So you kind of look through your email templates and you build out these different components, and then all those components get added together to make your email. And one of the things that I mentioned a little bit earlier that we were really excited about was in the supporter record invoice component. You'll see it, the renewal gift there. Like in our previous system, we couldn't include offline donations and online. So like if someone gave $50 online, but $250 in their renewal offline, we weren't able to reflect that. So just those were little things that we were able to tweak immediately. Like that was an easy thing to upgrade right away. So then if you go to the next slide, the exercise we went through was on the left. We built out and just kind of broke the email template into different components. And then you build those components and add them all up in different ways to the two emails over there. And it's super simple and easy to use. So yeah, that's just a little dive into email. Julie, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the really cool wins in EN is that you have reusable components for email. A lot of systems have reusable web components, but then you have to rebuild it every time you want to do something in the email, or you have, 15 different templates that have them or don't have them, and you always have to remember which template to use. In this, you can literally reuse these components across the different emails you're building, and I love that.
It's very cool. It makes it very convenient and easy to use as the non-expert user.
Exactly. You don't have to know HTML in depth to do anything here.
Exactly.
They look really, really nice. I'm loving where you're already at right now. And like you were saying, there's more to come in the quarters ahead, but I think you're off to a great start for sure. Let us also take a look at your donation pages. We've got a couple on the side here that I'm going to pull up, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A. So I'm going to reshare and give me one quick second here. There is kind of a standard page building approach that you've used for your general donation form, which is what you're now seeing on my screen. So if I were, for example, to demo this in a call with a prospective client, these are some of the things that I might call out, but then I'd love to hear from Sarah and Julie to kind of get the insider's take here. Really fully featured form that can do both one-time and monthly gifts with different ask arrays based on the gift type. You have enabled the option for a supporter to cover transaction fees, which in EN is pretty neat. You can actually set for, it can be a set percentage, it can be a set amount. You can do it in different ways. Tribute giving, and in some groups, some organizations, tribute giving, I was on a call today where it's 25% of their gifts are tributes. So very big part of it. And in this case, it creates, it's a conditionalized set of fields. So if I want to come to the site and make a tribute gift, I'm getting that experience. But if I'm not making a tribute gift, it's not extra fields and extra friction for me to get through the rest of this data capture piece, which is great. It offers the organization a chance to create some different opt-ins for things like email and SMS and interests. And then offering different payment methods. Really, really huge. The more payment methods that you offer a supporter, the higher the conversion rate of the fee of the total form. Love the little capture at the bottom. Unfortunately, a lot of nonprofit groups sometimes get card attacks, and we don't want that to happen. So can we keep it all safe? There was one thing I think I skipped over, which is right here. You've got a double the donation little integration built right into the form. So, I work for Engaging Networks. Engaging Networks is part of Double the Donation. If I made a gift to JGI, Engaging Networks could match that with a little bit of a workflow that gets set up by the form. What else should we know, Sarah and Julie, about this form?
Yeah, I was going to say two additional features. One, obviously, if you're on mobile, you get some digital wallet payment options, but
Yes.
also towards the top, you mentioned tribute and the recurring gift. What's cool about engaging networks without a lot of JavaScript, you can actually enable a click through from a link in an email or on your website so that it activates monthly instead of one time by default. It can activate the tribute checkbox by default. So when somebody lands on the page that, they already know they want to make a gift in memory of someone, they don't have to go through the process of checking it, it can already be checked for you. So that's neat to have those options maybe on an how you can support us page. And then as they click through, you don't have to have three different pages. You can actually have the page adjust based on the click through.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can even be extended for in things like email, what we call next suggested gift, where if you email me as someone who's already in the Engaging Networks database of your organization, and you know that my last gift was $100, let's just say you're going to ask me for maybe 100, 125, 175. You're not going to ask me for
Right.
$30,
Yeah.
50, $80 because I'm probably down to give a little more than that. So don't miss out on that opportunity. Sarah, what else should we know about this forum?
Yeah, I mean, this is our first go in engaging networks. I really love the image forward design. Our previous page was more copy heavy and it was still the long scroll form. So we kept that for just the first phase, but really being able to elevate the imagery and the branding of JGI. And we have on our roadmap for February to test the multi-step form. So
Hmm.
we're working in that direction. But yeah, we really love it. It's beautiful.
It
It
is
is.
really beautiful. Yeah, great first impression. If I'm making my first gift or my 50th gift, um, you want it to be an experience that really reflects the brand. And you built this sort of monthly, pure monthly giving, and you can build all of these different kinds of campaign type pages that are really rooted on a theme. And to your point, they don't all have to be a long form. They can be multi-step. You can test, hey, does my audience prefer multi-step versus the long form? You definitely, to Julie's point, want the table stakes of good mobile responsiveness because lots and lots of people are giving on their phones very easily. Just for me, it's like two clicks on the right side of my phone and boom,
Yeah.
Apple Pay has given the money.
Hmm.
But yes, anything that you want to add about this, because I think that this is a good example of taking your base of the big general form and now you're editing it and you can repurpose stuff you've
Yes.
already built.
Yes, and I think this is also a good example of how we can use EN to solve for things like this in one page, to Julie's point. And that's the learning curve that we will work through as we kind of really get deep into the EN ecosystem of what are those tips and tricks that do help you to be super efficient with forms. Um, so there's so much.
Yes.
Well, there is a lot. It is kind of a like a not a totally blank canvas, Ian. We give you a lot of tools to build what you want, and that is it means that we get to see a lot of really neat donor experiences come through from our clients, which is really inspiring for us, honestly. We have about 11 minutes to go. Would love to see if we've got any questions. I know I saw Chris's question come through in the chat, and maybe we've had some come through in Q&A. Hey, Steve Brown.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I've got a few questions here. Mike, I don't know if you want to put up our QR slide. If
Yes.
people have questions they want to ask, say tomorrow or a couple hours from now. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A or we have the chat. We'll get to the ones we can. Let's see here. To the panel, can you speak to how your approach to technology shifts have changed in the last 2 years or so? So obviously we have a lot of fundraisers who are maybe more stretched thin, reduced bandwidth. Has your maybe approach to the topic today changed in the last 12 months, 2 years, that kind of thing?
So for sure, we do see that often with our clients who are having smaller teams, because of furloughs or whatever's happening in that particular region or nonprofit space. And so they're looking for two things. One, a system that can do more without heavy administrative, without heavy development, sort of geek expertise, if you will. And two, if they need additional support, are there consultants that can support that particular platform in an efficient way? So yeah, I think having a system where um, I'm not going to say any other platform names, but where you have to have HTML savviness, where you have to know how to do JavaScript and CSS on a page level. Um, just creating a simple email requires 8 different hoops to jump through versus something that's going to give you a very easy to use. And Sarah touched on it earlier. You don't have to be a geek to use it. You end up with these beautiful pages and forums, these amazing email communications with targeted content and personalized content from a donor perspective, a profile perspective, and you don't have to be in the weeds with all the HTML. So yeah, I do think that a lot of clients are now saying, okay, we know this other system does similar things, but the problem is you have to have a geek on staff or a tech firm who's supporting you and doing all the things for you versus getting this all-inclusive platform that's, super simple to use.
Sarah, have things changed for you in the last year or two?
I would say the thing that comes to mind with this question is like customer experience. Like we are used to buying things quickly, we are used to making donations quickly, and sometimes the technology that nonprofits use isn't caught up enough to do that quickly on your phone. And so I think for me, it was wanting to be able to deliver kind of the experience that you would get on other, shopping sites and things like that, the same kind of level of sophisticated digital experience that we weren't able to get in other systems.
That's a great point.
Yeah. The when I said I tapped twice on my phone and Apple Pay sends the money over, that is a really, I mean, consumers in their lives have these habits that when they're donors, they could have the same habits to the benefit of the organization they're supporting. So love that call out there. And I echo what you also said earlier, Sarah, where you have this is a trend that I'm seeing a little bit where organizations are saying, okay, our email people are going to get a really clear email tool that they are behind. Our donations, online giving folks are going to get behind one tool. That is something that I'm seeing. In a lot of cases, we do it really well for all of those folks. But occasionally there is someone who is like, I'm really married to this email platform, Mike. Don't talk to us about email as much, but we'll look at everything else. So that is a trend that I'm starting to see.
I think we can do one more and then a little chance to wrap up and final thoughts, if that makes sense for you, Mike.
Yeah.
Uh, Julie, this one is related to your previous response a little bit, but maybe we can dig in on it a little bit more. How do you advise your clients on the balance of a product's capabilities versus the team's ability, their bandwidth, and their need for support?
Well, I think it's definitely any assessment should go in with that entire, a very full picture of the outcome. So having the interviews with the different team members who are going to be hands-on, so not just the decision makers. Decision makers will be the ones who stroke the contract, but the people who are going to be hands-on on the membership forms or event forms, the email, the donation forms, looking at the donor data, getting that data back into the CRM. Those are the ones that you really want to talk to about all of their challenges, their wish lists, their daily activities. In addition to obviously talking to decision makers, looking at a platform or an ecosystem of platforms that will meet all the needs for that particular nonprofit because there's never a one size fits all. Even children's hospital to children's hospital, environmental to environmental are going to have different needs and very specific differences in what their goals are with their data, with their donors, and with their systems. And then really being thoughtful across all of those. And I think a consultant is coming in, as I mentioned earlier, non-biased opinion and being to have those non-biased discussions so that if people are very, well, I want to keep this because this is all I know, I've done it for 20 years. We're coming in with a more holistic view. We're able to talk through all of the different challenges, all the goals, and all of the overarching functionality that the different platforms have.
It's a really good question. Yeah. It's becoming increasingly difficult, I would say, for organizations to go into these kinds of change processes with maybe the energy that they might have had a few years ago when interest rates were lower, for example, inflation was a little more under control. the world geopolitically was a bit of a different place, all over the place, quite frankly. So I think that some of these questions that are being asked today, just like that one right now, is such a key starting point for a lot of organizations. If you're at the beginning of this cycle, these are the things to take the time on to really try and get right. And to Julie's an earlier comment that you made, Julie, is just like bringing it up. Sarah, you talked about this is like communicating openly when you feel like there are real concerns there. Because if you don't handle someone's concern, it doesn't just go away on its own, but you got to bring it to the surface.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Cool.
But this can all be exciting. And
Yes. Yes.
a lot of my clients feel this strain or like there are bricks on their shoulders, but it's actually a very exciting move and it's exciting movement that can happen for the organizations and streamline things for years to come.
Oh yeah. We should not discount the payoff here of doing all of this great hard work. Sarah, you're already seeing it. It looks like, and the best is yet to come, I would say. Are there any final words of wisdom or bits of advice that you would share with our folks who are here today, or who might watch this on a recording down the road?
The only thing I would say is just do your homework and really pay attention to working with consulting firms. If you're going to work with a consultant, work with the firms that work across multiple platforms and don't just work with one or two. Because if you work with the ones that are really proficient in just one or two, those will be the solutions offered versus a much more specific spectrum of things that will fit your needs.
Yeah, and I would just say, I guess, start early, be patient, communicate more than you think you need to, and keep your eye on the ball, both in terms of your hard deadline, like ours was the contract deadlines, but also on all the exciting things that you're going to be able to build. It'll be worth it. It's that investment of time will be worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's worth it, folks. You can do it. We are here for you. If you want to reach out, certainly to Engaging Networks, that QR code is helpful. If you want to reach out to Julie to have a conversation that if you're, before you go and talk to a person like me, talk to a person like Julie, that's really helpful. Sarah, really appreciate your perspective as someone who has lived this, not just actually at JGI, but also at National Geographic Society as well. You've seen this in some different places. So appreciate all of you being here and the two of you for sharing what you've shared today. I learned a lot. I always enjoy that aspect. Hope everyone else who was here did as well.